I'm Larry Kiley.
My name is Hap Halloran.
Hap Halloran. Hap, you're in town to do us a very big favor, us being the B-29 All Veterans Memorial Committee, and you're going to do a presentation tomorrow night.
Yes, sir.
At a banquet dinner. And you were in the B-29 service during World War II.
Yes.
And the way we've kind of gone into these things, what year did you go into service?
Joined shortly after Pearl Harbor, which was in 1941, and I enlisted at Wright-Patterson Field, Dayton, Ohio. But after I had enlisted, I was not called to service because apparently the lack of planes and the air bases to train us. So I did not actually get into service. I think it was the latter part of 1942 that I actually was called into service.
And when you went into service, and what did you go in at? At Wright-Patterson? At that time, I think it was just called.
No, I really expected it. I would be an air cadet, and but when I really was actually called, I went to I lived in Cincinnati at that time, and we were actually told to report to a camp on the Kentucky side of the river, which was a basic military infantry place. And, you know, I was a little surprised. I was looking for an airplane or something. So we were over there, and I can remember my mother went to see me and waved me off, and my gal friend was there, and you go off in your civilian clothes, and you didn't know where you're going. You know, the communications were, but that's where I was, and rode the train to I think it was going to Shepherd Field, Texas, or someplace like that. And so we did that, and I think part of the mystique of being in the service, and I recommend 2 years service for all of youth today, to get in there and be with people and understand real life. And so I milked that for all it was worth, from an understanding of the new world versus living in a small town where I was, and that was great.
If going along with that train of thought, people who never get more than 60 miles from home, as they say, and they just never have the experiences, do they?
No, you get locked into a certain knowledge level and a decision-making level.
Mm-hmm.
I can say this now, but if I hadn't gotten out of town, I'd been one of those straight John guys, you know.
And the way it is they look straight down, and all they can see is a tunnel, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
If it didn't happen in my county, well, it didn't happen.
Not important.
Not important.
Yeah.
Right.
I shouldn't criticize that, but that's true. And then to be in, and you're doing this training and everything, and you're doing the exercises and the march-ons and the parades, and I said, when are we going to get into what I signed up for? And so finally did take the test, and I qualified as a navigator. And I love math, and I love this concept of working with the stars, and so I was pleased. I don't think I really would have made a great pilot. I wouldn't have felt safe for the other 10 guys as it turned up in the crew. But boy, when it came to navigation, I loved it, and I did a great job. And to do a 3-star fix and be able to plot those things in and magically advance us for the speed of your plane and say, guys, out to the right, 20 miles ahead, there's going to be an island. You know, you put your neck right on the line. And I loved that. To solve that math problem, shooting the stars, today sometimes, well, I don't anymore since the incident in New York, but I'd be invited up in the cockpit, you know, we're going overseas, and with foreign airlines, why they'll let you come up there. Not now. Because all they do is just push a button, you know. I said, you guys really don't know what it's like to do a navigation over the ocean.
Figures it for them.
Yeah.
When you went into service and you went to this infantry camp, and then you followed on, as you said, you took the test to be a navigator. Where did you go for navigation training?
Went to Hondo, Texas, which is west of San Antonio. Then after we completed that was exciting stuff, really. Certain people, I want to sound like a snob now, but if you had a pretty good high level in the class, you know, as a grade level, why then you were given the opportunity to also participate, to volunteer to go into bombardier training. And the reason for this was that there was a new plane that was going to be coming out, and they wanted dual-rated navigators and bombardiers. You know, if one of them was killed, the navigator can go up and drop the bombs, or vice versa. And you kind of skip that part about why. And so I volunteered to go in and completed bombardier training at Roswell, New Mexico. And from there, and I loved every bit of the service. I was the kind of guy that when we were in that military maneuvers and taking these 25-mile hikes, which I resented, I finally said, now shape up, Hap. You know, they didn't call me Hap then. I hadn't proven, but I was still Ray, you know. And so we'd go out there and camp out, and I would see these wildflowers growing in Texas. And to see a wildflower growing in Texas, you know, so I remember doing things like this. I would kind of take them and put them in my bag or whatever it was and take them back and then put them in an envelope and mail them home to my mother. Now, you know, I see some of that stuff today at home in my drawers, and I have mixed feelings. I wonder what the guys thought of me doing that, picking flowers on a 25-mile hike. And then on the other hand, I'm glad that I had that kind of respect and relationship with my mother that I did those things. I think I was a too goody-goody guy. That changed later.
That changed.
Yeah. So
when you were down in Texas and at Hondo, going to navigator school, you finished navigator school, and where to from there?
To Roswell, New Mexico for bombardier training.
Okay. Yeah.
And that was sort of like a big carnival, and it was great to think that you could drop a bomb from 20,000 feet and twist those knobs and do it. And we'd do that sometimes in the daytime, sometimes at night. You'd have these 100-pound bombs with sand in them principally, and I guess about 15 pounds of explosive powder in the nose. Purpose of that was so that when you dropped and took the picture, you could see whether you were a good or bad bombardier. And it was amazing how accurate we could be, you know, dropping those things. And then at night, while the shack is what was the target triangulation down below had a light on it, and that was a shack. And there was nothing greater in the world than to get a shack, meaning that your bomb dropped on the target. I think sometimes we claim shacks at night that probably really didn't happen, but in the daytime we could do it, and you're before God and all the people, you know.
Right.
But that was thrilling stuff, and we'd bet maybe a quarter. Now, a quarter was a lot of money that we could drop closer than somebody else. And all this while you were developing this thing of comradeship and trust and responsibility and developing confidence, you know. So we came out well trained.
From Roswell, where did you go after bombardier school?
We were then assigned to just up the road here, Salina, Kansas, and that was a B-29 training base by designation. And then when I went there, and then there were other people coming in, a crew on a B-29 was 11 people. So in our particular case, at Salina, Kansas, Smoky Hill Air Base, I think we called it, that sounded more exciting. And all of a sudden, our government does a lot of things, and some are right, and I think there were a higher percentage of things right back in the 1940s than there are today, percentage-wise. But anyhow, out of this group of people coming in from gunner schools and navigation and pilot schools and radio and everything, we all come together in one big hodgepodge, and somehow, I don't know, the magic or luck or prayer, they put us together, 11 of us people, and subsequently we had to have a name. You know, you couldn't fly without a name, and you couldn't fly without a painting on the nose arch, you know. But in the early part of the war, we didn't have enough planes to waste time tying them up to paint. But in any event, we decided, and I think I was a factor in that, when talking about saving it, we're going to have some fancy name, you know, like Devil's Lady or something like that.
Right.
I said, no. I said, if we're going to be that close to God in this high-altitude plane, which we were rare to get the time to train in because they were in short supply, I said, we're going to have something really good up on that nose. It's going to be Rover Boys Express, which was a comic strip in those days. Bunch of animals on a go-kart with like the wagon wheels, and you're running down a hill. That's what we were, the Rover Boys Express. We never did have that name painted on our plane leader because you didn't have the time to do it.
Right.
You had to do the job you're over there for and not do a comic act.
Right.
But the thing that impressed me was that how you bond together, you know, a group of people. We were from 11 different states in this country. And average age of the crew, and I generally like to compute things, it was 21 and a half. And the youngest were 18, a couple of gunners 18 and 19, and radar was 18. But you develop this faith in working together on that. And I just think that's sort of magic. And to me, it was like a Americana painting, you know. And you trusted each other implicitly. You had to, and you performed. You never let any part of the crew down. And those were great days. And then finally, we did complete what could be called the operational training, and we were then sent up to Lincoln, Nebraska. We were on a hold pattern up there until planes became available. I don't know if we were up there a month or 6 weeks, you know, but we did exciting things like going to the top of the state building, I think, in Lincoln. That's pretty big, you know, for a bunch of farm boys. But we do things like that, and you did a lot of those things together. Now, there was a distinction, you know, between officers and men from a living quarters and everything, but I think those things are all overcome by when you are together at the plane. And I must say I was very fortunate to be on the Rover Boys Express, and I still feel bad, and I still think of them, that all of them didn't come home, you know, later on. So then we were called from Lincoln, and I think this is the way it happened. You're more excited about other things. We went to Harrington, Kansas, and I remember as Herington.
That's correct.
And I see it misspelled all the time, and I say those
With two
guys.
R's.
Yeah, I said they didn't pay any attention to the signs coming in now entering Harrington. But we stayed there, and it wasn't too long a time. And one day we went down to the operational shed, you know, and nothing really fancy. But that's okay. The excitement was in living and getting ready to go to combat. And we weren't even smart enough to have maybe an element of fear. And but anyhow, one day we were down there. They said, "There it is. There's your plane." And can you imagine? This was December of 1944, early December, and they say, "There's your plane." Now, we had some hours, obviously, in a B-29 when we were at Smoky Hill. And not a lot, because we didn't have that many. We had B-17 time and all of that kind of stuff, and some ground training, obviously. But here, that's your plane out there. And man, that's the biggest Christmas present we ever had, and it was assembled. I still hate where, you know, toys must be assembled. That thing was ready.
Ready
so
to go.
We went out there, all 11 of us, you know, and we clambered over it and inside it, and whew. Then after that, we had to do, you know, certain basics on engine flights and checks and things like that. And I always remember, as a navigator, that we had to swing the compass, which really meant tests for the correctness of the compass. And we did that over the section lines in Kansas. Now, you see how smart those farmers were, whoever they were. Their lines were so aligned to north and south that we could swing over there and at low altitude, you know, tell the captain, the pilot, "Now keep it right on this course, no variance." And then we were doing compass readings. So you may have a plus, you know, to make. And you're doing that by the farm fields down below on this high-tech plane. And I was always impressed, and even today as I fly across the country, I look down and see the section lines, and I said, one time when I was young, man, we swung that, and then if some passenger looks like he's fairly alert, I'll say, "I want to tell you about those section lines down there." And the guy probably says, "What the hell, I don't want to hear about those." But I want to tell him about how important those lines were. So we did that, and we did it, and then said, "Okay, you're ready to go," and we waited a few more days. I don't have the precise number of days. They were pretty exciting. And then one day we were told, you know, tomorrow you're going to leave, and they gave us a brown envelope, you know, just like in those movies you see today, given to you, and you gather around. And our first stop was from Harrington, Kansas, alone, and that was one of the important factors. That's just learning of accepting responsibility. And you're going to fly to Mather Field, California, which is near Sacramento, about 100 miles in from San Francisco. And here we are, you know, we're taking off and we're flying out there. You know, we'd never been, you know, over the Rockies or anything like that. And we were pretty domestic. We probably got as far as Garden City or something. And while we were in training here, I do remember things, and I'll probably be thrown in jail for this. No, it isn't that bad. I think it's youth at its best. We used to go to bombing practice ranges, and they were called Wabansie Range and Potawatomi. And somehow when you get used to going there, whether it's at daytime especially, and you're out there dropping bombs and doing a good job. As I said, we used to bet quarters on who could get, I could beat our bombardier, and you know, but it was that spirit, competing for a good reason. And I remember, I must have been we were getting ready to go overseas, really. And so I said, you know what we ought to do? We ought to save one bomb today, and when we're heading back to base, that lake that we cross over, I think I could locate it on a map now, and say, you know, and through the bomb site, you could, you know, see things on the lake and boats and things like that. And I said, why don't we save one bomb? Now, these were only 100-pound bombs, and had sand in them and an explosive charge so you could see where you hit. Let's save one, and we'll drop it down there in the lake. And occasionally you might see a boat fishing here and one down in this cove and that. And we were so sure that we could drop that thing offset, say from after we found a boat, and we wanted to get in, if we had a big side wind or something, we wanted to have the wind where we're going directly into it so we could preset all the gears on the bomb site. And with that, I'd have bet we could be within 200 feet. And so we picked out this boat out in the middle, you know, and we did the trial run over, and then went back on a reciprocal and then said, okay, we're ready. We got this thing all locked in. And we dropped that bomb. And all I can think of in the years since, and now as you get older, you think, you know, retired people down there fishing. I don't know if there was one person or two people on the boat, but I quite often think of, wonder what they thought, because a bomb, you know, 100 pound, makes a lot of whistling noise coming down. Mm-hmm. And here's a guy out there probably flicking his, you know, spin outfit out there, and our bomb did hit offset from the boat, I would imagine 200 feet. And we were sent out of town shortly after that, you know, not because of that, but I was inclined to leave that behind. I had told that once before in recent years, so if a sheriff shows up tomorrow, those guys who were probably fishing, I think they probably have now gone west, as we say. Yeah. But anyhow, other than that, that's not what we were paid to do.
Well, Harrington, you talked about Harrington, and I'm going to throw a little side note in there. I know Harrington very well.
Do you?
Yeah, I railroaded out of Harrington. I was a locomotive engineer on the Rock Island Railroad.
On the Rock Island? Mm-hmm. And you know I was with the Rock Island too.
No.
Well, I didn't want to tell you. Went bankrupt. And,
in 1980?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where were you at? I was in Harrington.
Well, I wasn't. I bailed out earlier than that because I knew we were going downhill. We had the Rock Island Rockets. Remember that? Mm-hmm. I think the hot consist train with the perishables was 92 or something.
93.
93?
94. 93 and 94.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, anyhow, too bad we didn't know each other then.
When were you with the Rock Island?
Oh, Jiminy. Well, I was with them before I went in service, and I went into service, say, the end of 42, and then I was gone 4 years, and then I came back with them, and I came out of the hospital, and, you know, in those days, the doctors were not familiar with things like we now have a name for everything, post-stress syndrome, you know, mm-hmm. And all I knew was I was nervous and shaky. But finally, after all the hospital time and everything, where they said maybe it'd be the best cure, they didn't use that term, might be most advantageous, to go back to the job. Did you like your job? What did you do? I was a clerk. I was a clerk with the Rock Island Railroad, the route of the Rockets. And they said, maybe if you went back there, and it might be the thing to do. So I did, you know, and I showed up, and what I'm going to say, I'm kidding about, but it's sort of my look back. I went to work back in the terminal in Cincinnati, and that's where I lived, and that's where I worked when I left with the Rock Island. Went in, took the elevator to the 7th floor. We were still there. And walked in, we had double doors, because sometimes passengers came in to buy tickets. And there was my desk. I think it had been dusted, but not frequently. And in my inbound mailbox, there was some stuff there pretty old. I'm not saying 4 years. But anyhow, I came back, and that's where I joined. But obviously, I could sit still about 15 minutes, and then I'd get up and walk. And I don't like to sit still very long anyhow. If I get up and leave, I will be back here. But anyhow, I'm at that desk and, trying to get back in a different sync. And what I did now really wasn't that important in the big picture. And what I was doing over Tokyo was really big. Mm-hmm. And here's a whole shift in life.
Yes.
And a slower pace in the responsibilities. I was a very poor clerk. And I was confused about life and things like that. And I'd get out and walk around the halls. And then after that, I'd go down on the elevator and walk around the streets in Cincinnati. And I must say that the Rock Island was understanding and actually promoted me to where I would have an outside job selling. And so that was very considerate of them. We don't want to talk too much about the Rock Island.
No, we could talk about the Rock
there,
Island, right, yeah. But I just wanted to throw a side note in there that, the little town of Harrington, which is a very small town, played a very important part in World War II with the B-29.
Oh, see, did they have long runways there?
I think not extremely long, no.
So when they were completed at Wichita, that's where our plane was built, did they fly them out of Wichita Airport up to Harrington to give to us?
Yes. If I remember right, if I remember my history right, that's how they got to Harrington, to Salina, to Pratt. Of course, the first ones came to Pratt for testing. But
which side are you on, left or right up there?
I'm on the left side.
Left side?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm on the right side.
All right. Well, you were at Mather Field, and from Mather Field, where'd you go?
Our next stop from Mather Field, California, was to Rogers Field in Honolulu. I think we only spent a day and a half at Mather Field, and then we took off at night. We were alone, again, on this mission, the second leg of our flight to our destination. And we climbed, I'd say, to 18,000 feet. And we were only about 90 miles from the coast, from the Pacific Ocean. And as we were moving west, by this time, in December of 1944, the lights in the city of San Francisco was on. There were no blackouts. We thought the subs were all gone. But as we were moving out, and I knew San Francisco would be off on our left side shortly, and so I just alerted the crew. I said, hey guys, in a few minutes we're going to be coming up. We'll be north of San Francisco, and the look down, it's a crystal clear night, and you might want to take a look at it. And I know I did. And so as we came up on it and looked down on that city, it's a beautiful city at night, beautiful in the daytime. The quality of person might be different, than in other places, but I'm talking about beauty of the place and everything. So as we came up, all of a sudden, our crew was normally very loquacious, chit-chat, unimportant things, and it's again building that team thing and everything, and they all must have looked down and thought that was a good idea because there was no discussion whatsoever. And I can only speak for myself. As we passed and looked down there and saw the city, then for the first time, I had the feeling of this was different, what we were doing now. And I think I related to the family at home when we were leaving the family. We were leaving training and all of that, and we were going to combat. And it just seemed to be that there was a transition in life from youth to manhood. And it was pretty marked in my mind then. And so there was no talk, and then you hit the ocean and there's still light, and then you move out. Maybe we're 20 minutes out, we're away from shore, and it's totally dark down below. Stars are brilliant up ahead and on top. And I think that did take place. Now, to the other people, I don't know how they felt about it, but maybe they had the same feeling, and I never will forget it. And since I've flown almost 6 million air miles, and a lot of them into and out of San Francisco, even now, sometimes if I'm on a nighttime and look down there, my mind goes back to then. And that was something. And then so we flew, and it took us 11 hours and 20 minutes I remember unimportant things in life, but I specifically, the biggest thing we'd flown over before that in our training was the southern tip of Lake Michigan. And now we're crossing 2,240 miles of ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And we're alone. And so we did get in there, and they were all, we could have homed in on the radio there. And they said, "You want a radio?" I said, "I don't want anything. I want to do this thing, no assistance like that."
Honing your skills.
Sir?
Honing your skills.
Yeah, that's right. You got to learn to do that stuff. And if I look bad and tell them that Diamond Head is going to be on our right in 16 minutes, then it should be there. And so we did, and to pull into there and see the island. And then we went in and landed at Rogers Field. I think we spent, I don't know, maybe 2 days there. Next orders were Kwajalein. I didn't know where Kwajalein was and didn't know how to spell it. But we headed for there. And as I recall, that was about 2,000 miles also. A pretty long leg. And the reason we had to go into there, we could not get to our ultimate destination, which was Saipan in the northern Mariana Islands, where we were going to operate from to bomb Japan. So we spent a night at Kwajalein. That was a very small atoll there, and the fueling islands. And boy, they didn't want you in there more than one night because they had, I don't know how many planes they could accommodate, B-29s, but they were coming in there and going out. So from there, I think it was only about 6 hours to Saipan. And to come in there, and land, and you're out there in the tropics now, the Central Pacific, and some of our fellows who were there ahead of us, they had to come out, and they're veterans by now. They had been up to Tokyo, big time stuff. Now,
Yeah.
You guys don't know, but you know how you do. Just like school kids,
Mm-hmm.
only our weapon was bigger, 29, and so they all did want to help us. You better dig an air raid shelter, immediately, and don't tell us what to do. And the Japanese were coming down from Iwo Jima, which was about 650 miles north of there, coming down with Betty bombers and some things like that. And that very first night that we arrived, while we were quiet ridiculing them, a raid came over and the air raid siren sounded, and the one of the planes, Black Widows, were up there, and shooting down planes and bombs, and that's when you knew. That's another transition you make. We were digging. It was very difficult digging into coral over there at Saipan, but you did something. Mm-hmm. And so now we were getting in and started to fly our missions.
Flew your missions out of Saipan.
Saipan.
And you flew to Tokyo.
The first mission we flew was probably a warm-up mission, and would be our first experience with real flak. So we went up to Iwo Jima. And I think some of the fellows said, "Hey, that wasn't even combat." But to us, that was combat. And go up there, and maybe it took us 3 hours and something to get up. And the target was the runways down on Iwo Jima. And the first time we came over, we didn't have a good setup. Like when we had the fishing boat down below with the retired guys, we knew we could drop it. Mm-hmm. And when you're a little nervous and then some flak breaks, everything changes. So we did come in with a good mission. It wasn't going to affect the outcome of the war, but at least we knew we could drop live bombs and hit the runway. And that's what we did. And coming home, though, I recall I was lucky to have a good family, mother, dad, and brothers. And I thought when I was over there especially. But coming back from there, I thought, gee, this is Christmas Eve back home. I didn't adjust for the time differential, and I could. But I said, this is Christmas Eve at home with Mother and Daddy, and if he's not working, he works 7 days a week. We'll be around a Christmas tree, and we'll have the little electric train out, and we'll have the gifts, and we're opening them, and the Dick Tracy little books were 10 cents.
Right.
Big stuff.
Right.
We had the B-29 early Christmas, But so I thought of them, and you get kind of said, you say, wow, I got to get back there,
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the first mission. Then we went up to Kobe, Akashi, and we weren't flying good missions as B-29s in those days. We at that altitude, and we hit the strange thing. We now tonight, weatherman. I was up with Carl, the radio station man, this morning, and we were talking about the jet stream. We didn't know what it was, but that wind would be 180, 200 miles an hour, and you get up there.
Yeah, I've read about that, where they didn't understand that at that
Yeah.
time. They didn't understand those extreme high volume
Yeah.
air.
So, but anyhow, we did have a good mission. That was a Kawasaki plant. I was over there some months ago, and I have a lot of friends in Japan now, and they were showing me, there's the building you hit. I said, no, we did more than that to it, and they did. They had to rebuild it, but that was the best mission we had.
Yeah.
And then the next mission we had was Tokyo. Every target had a number. The Nakajima aircraft plant on the west edge of Tokyo, Musashino, was target number 357. Now, everybody, the veterans there, knew that was a tough target. So when you're in the briefing and you're sitting there, and they say the target, maybe we have a Tuesday briefing for a Wednesday mission, target number 357. And you don't want to, start throwing up out of fear or something, because that was a bad one. But you kind of look and roll your eyes, and, you try to take it in stride. But that was a tough target because it was so critical to them. They had a lot of anti-aircraft fire down below, concentrated, and they knew where we were coming, apparently. I don't know who, blah, blah, blah. But anyhow, that's where we went in and made it far inland. I think there was a total of maybe 75 planes that started, maybe malfunctions. I'm going to use the number 67 B-29s on January 27th, 1945, target 357, Musashino. And so we went in, and boy, after we hit inland, there were a lot of fighter attacks and flak, which was totally, because we were told at the briefing, at your altitude tomorrow at 30,000 feet, maybe 32, really, you want to get up there, and there'll be no flak or very light flak, not an aircraft fire, and no fighters at your altitude. So you believe that because you want to. But when you get up there, I can tell you, when we hit the coast, came over Hamamatsu, the city, and pretty far west, so we could make that turn and still get in there. And we were not the lead plane, and we were flying on the right side. But anyhow, there were fighters up there, which was contrary, and some of them were up at our altitude. Then we went in and made the turn. We were heading for Tokyo target. And we were on course, and you feel good then because our airspeed with that wind, say 180 mile an hour, just about directly behind you, gave you a ground speed, and at that altitude and the temperature and everything, we were doing about 450 miles an hour. That's pretty good for a prop plane. Mm-hmm. It made you feel good, And inside it was temperature controlled, pressurized, 70 degrees, man, just like California on a good day, And but as we moved inland, and there were intense fighters. Subsequent to that, the reports really came out from all the reports that they had over 300 fighters up that day, most they ever had. I'm not talking about the kamikaze guys later where they may have had 500. Right. But for fighter opposition, they had over 300 up, and because we were doing, a group come in here, and another group come in here, and another group, they could actually come in, go through the formation, come up and hit and, wrap around. And it was reported that there were approximately 900 fighter attacks on our group of planes over that target that day. And we didn't have time to keep score because then when we were on the bomb run and the target up ahead and 70 degrees in the plane, and I had just checked the outside temperature on my dial, it was 58 below. And then there were two fighters coming in from about 11 o'clock rolling into us. And when they're aiming directly at you, the first thing you think is a ramming. That was common practice for a fighter to ram into a 29 plane. Mm. And there was much ramming done over there, and many planes knocked down. So
that was almost a kamikaze feat right there in the air.
No, I guess
we didn't call it that.
Yeah, kamikaze was more a bunch of kids.
Yeah.
That they put the bandage on their head and they didn't drink a sake and said goodbye, and didn't have enough fuel to really train them. So, the difference. The end result was the same normally, but I have known kamikaze people, the rammers over there. One of them survived too, and their mission in life was to come in about 10 feet over the nose of the plane, so clear their fuselage, come back, and with the left wing, hit the rudder on a B-29, spin off of that, and then bail out. Some people over there, the Japanese pilots, actually succeeded doing that. Yeah. 1 for 2, and we've got pictures of him. And friends of mine in Japan now are writing books and putting them into English about B-29s and fighter opposition and getting both views. And I've mixed with a lot of, most of their fighter pilots now are dead. 2 reasons: they were shot down. They lost about 400 off of the Saipan thing there, the turkey shoot. And but today, because they were fighting in China, say in the late 30s, and they lost people over there, and so there are very few fighters left over there, because their average age is probably 6 or 7 years older than us, and we're now in the 80 to 85 bracket, so they're about 86 to 90 some. There aren't many left, but I've been with some of them.
I saw on your website, I did go on your website, and I see you had some pictures with some of them. One of them you were playing golf with. I thought that was...
Saburo Sakai.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, he was my hero. And so when I decided to go back over there and work through Ambassador Mansfield, I wanted to go back over because I was in bad shape mentally. And I thought maybe, and I was having continuous nightmares after I got home. And it was disruptive to the family. And the nightmares were pretty common. 3, I'd be falling through space and I'm screaming and I'm reaching out, trying to get something to hold on to stop. Probably the free fall, you know, if I fell 24,000 feet. And that was one, and a lot of noise and screaming, but I'd stand bed. And another one was fire, and having been through the March 10th early morning fire raid when General LeMay changed the strategy and said, to heck with this high altitude stuff. And we weren't doing too well from up there. We're going to bring them in low. And I obviously was on the ground already up in Tokyo, and I wasn't in on the briefing. I'd love to have been there. But so one night on March 10th, about 0100 hours there, I heard these multi-engine planes coming over, and I'm in my cage, black cage, you're cold, you have one blanket, you're hurting, you're covered with sores, and all of a sudden I said, where did the Japanese get all of these multi-engine? And then the bombs started to drop. And of course I didn't know about the change in strategy. And I would say that was the most frightening night of my life ever, to be there. And the city burned around us, and even though the target was on the east side of Tokyo, on the other side of the Sumida River, Sumida, and that's where the aiming point was for the pathfinders and so forth. But as the firestorm started, there was some winds that night that I can remember. Maybe it was 20 miles an hour, but in that old wooden cage where I was, and in that old stables, you know, creaked. That's what I wanted to say. Maybe it was my bones that were creaking. But anyhow, sitting there, and then this started, and then the bombs, and then the fire, and these pathfinders put bombs here and here. You fellows behind, drop them in there. And the Japanese really wanted to get those pathfinders when they learned it, so that if the plot wasn't planned, you know, so there were men. Those pathfinders were brave guys. They were great flyers, and they took heavy losses. But I didn't know all that while I'm sitting in the cage, you know. And so that's where I was through that fire. And God, the wind must have gotten up to 100 miles an hour. And I didn't have any windows in my cage, but up in the back there was a little 2 feet by 8 inches, and there was a black cloth hanging down, so we could never see anything. But that night, when the firestorm started and the wind got up, then that black cloth raised, and for the first time I could see outside. And to see the sky red, and to hear the noise, and to feel the heat, and the smoke came in, and the end of the stable where I was burned off, and the roof started on fire. The guards were smart. They just handcuffed my feet and my hands, and I'm there, you know, tied up in the corner. And they left for their own safety. Can't fault them for that. And so somebody put out that fire up on top. It was sand. I don't know who did it. And the door was never replaced, but that's how close I thought. I never thought I'd get through that night. I think a raid lasted about 2 hours and a half, but the actual fire continued, and smoke, and that was my very scary night.
You got on the ground. you were shot down over Tokyo?
Yeah, we were actually hit before we got to the target zone. And then they blew out the nose section. And when that happened, we lost our pressurization. The temperature outside was 58, inside was 70. When this happened, there was a transition. We went 128-degree temperature change like that. And I know there are people and doctors who say, well, you can't survive under that. Well, some of us did. And as to why, I don't know. You know, maybe if you're writing a good book, you say a miracle happened over Tokyo. But I can't explain how we did get through that. And the lack of oxygen at that altitude, you're sucking oxygen. And then you go into a state of denial. You know, you got two engines on fire and one feathered, and you don't want to admit that you're in the ultimate trouble. And so you try to maintain, you go into a state of denial. And then you say somehow, and I gave the captain of the plane, Snuffy Smith, I said, I had the coordinates written down here on my hand. I still write on my hand where we had a sub offshore. But I gave him a heading of 133 degrees. But by then we couldn't really steer. And somehow magically, while we were losing altitude, it was at a very small, plunge thing. And then we finally knew, and we were honest enough to say, we got to get out. We can't make it to the ocean. And so with that, the normal escape hatch up front would have been through where the nose wheel folds up into the plane. We would have dropped that and had about a 4 foot by 4 foot folded up and gone through there. Couldn't get the wheel down. So we were locked in there, we thought. Now the good thing was pressurization was broken. But in the meantime, our radio was out internally, and you never break silence over the target, But then we couldn't even talk to the people in the back of our plane, which is through a long tunnel, maybe 30, 35 feet. And we would never let those young kids in the back, not know that we. So one of our fellow from Montana volunteered, took off his parachute, went through the tunnel, went back and told the three 18, 19-year-old gunners, the radar man, went all the way to the back because pressurization was broken. He could do that, otherwise it wouldn't have been possible to get into the tail gunner was dead. The radar man said he's going to jump, and the other three, and so when the radio man came back, said, Hap, all clear in the back, they're going to jump. And so then, up front, we started to go, and all 6 of us did get out. But I was still there, and there were 2 of us left. Snuffy Smith, our aircraft commander, he didn't live long after we came home, and that was sad. But he said, you got to get out of here, Hap, this thing's going to explode. And what did I do? We had a box. We could order the food we wanted. I had ordered white bread turkey sandwiches with the crust cut off and mayonnaise. So I'm up there, stupid. I mean, dumb.
Stuff you remember, though.
I'm eating, yeah.
Oh, you're eating.
I'm eating them, yeah. And then also had chocolate pudding in little plastic cups. In the stores these days, supermarkets, Safeway or whatever it is around here, Kroger or Dillon's, they have those little chocolate things, and those are meaningful to me. You may not think anything special about them, but I take some of those, and that's control. See, now I want to have that chocolate when I want it. Kind of infantile, really. But anyhow, that's it. And I did get out. I made the decision that because of the freezing, because of the lack of oxygen and being shot at if you opened your chute, and that did happen. And not one way either, both ways maybe. And so after I did get out, I decided to fall free. I made that decision before. And I think part of it would have been cowardice, saying, I don't want to face what's on the ground. But I didn't want to face what was in the plane, and you want to try to, the Japanese always questioned me about why I didn't allow myself to be killed, because that's the way they would do it. And I had a difficult time explaining. They didn't like my answer. They would have all been killed. Well, we'll kind of get this wrapped up here now, but that's it, free fall. And somebody asked me recently, and I figured it out, if 120 mile an hour fall speed, and I went from 24,000 feet, probably 2.5 minutes free fall. Then you get down, and eventually you can see the ground pretty clearly then and see people kind of following you. So I hit, and just an executive summary would be, I was worked over harshly, which one could expect. It would happen in Pratt if enemy planes were over here. That's And so some of our people on the crew were killed then. I don't know why I wasn't. Some of them I just found out 2 years ago. The tail gunner was dead. We knew he'd go down, but I found out people who were there and checked our plane after that the other 3 young gunners in the middle apparently made the decision to ride it down, and that's kind of sad. I've visited their grave sites in Honolulu in the National Cemetery, and I just talked to them, glad they were with the Rover Boys and sorry about what happened. And I just kneel there, and then one of them was up on the MIA wall. He was our bombardier best friend, and when we were coming, and he was, heavy blood from the shell coming through the middle. But as he came by my desk, we stood, and he was my best friend. And we embraced, and he was covered, and he said, "I'll see you on the ground, Hap." And so now when I go back, I've been there 3 times in Honolulu, and I go up, and he's up on the wall here. I said, "Bobby, you were right. We see each other on the ground." Mm-hmm. And just about 3 weeks ago, his wife, whom I was trying to, called me. And so, I could update that. There's no good news. I can't change what happened.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. That's correct.
So we're running along here now.
Yeah, and so the war ended. You were still in Tokyo in the prison camp.
No, I was taken out of the cage on the 68th day when I was confined alone, and I was taken out after the fire raid, which was a significant thing over there. And when they took me out, they said, "Get your shoes." That automatically meant this was your final trip. And I was frightened all the time that I was there, and I prayed constantly. And that was my only outlet, to thinking that somebody knew where I was, and somebody in whom I had great faith. And so when they took me out that day, I thought, this is the final. And after that fire raid, I don't know if I mentioned or not, the next morning the fellow came in, a good, decent interpreter, and said, "Hap, here's what happened last night. And we had a staff meeting this morning, and the decision was made to execute you B-29ers. I think there were 5 of us, but we never knew definitely. We couldn't talk." And that's started that day. Then this day, taken out, I was loaded on a truck and taken up to a zoo. I've been back there 7 times, to Ueno Zoo on the north side of Tokyo, about 4 miles from the torture prison where I was, right downtown by the Emperor's Palace in the moat. Taken up there, and the 2 guards were pretty decent because there was no Japanese officer there. Actually helped me off when I was in bad shape. And they kind of helped me climb a little hill. Maybe it was 2 degrees. And they had some compassion for me. And then they took me and took all my clothes and put me in the back door of a tiger cage with the metal bars up front. And then that afternoon, people marched by in the center of this building and could view us, and all my clothes off, and I had never ever had any water or soap or anything to wash with, and the bed bugs, lice, and fleas just totally saturated your body, and you're running, and so you're standing there. I think the message was the military were getting pressure from the civilians. Those B-29s are killing us, and stop them. And so they probably were saying, "Look at that B-29 guy, had a beard that long and hair and dirt and running swords." That was hard to maintain your dignity then, and I think it was a harsh thing to do. But anyhow, I was taken out, put in a prison camp, and for the first time I was with other B-29 people. None of us were POWs. We were all on trial for our lives and signed a statement. And there we spent time from, must have been April 1st. You don't have a calendar to watch and a pencil. Sometimes you lose track of time.
Right.
Other times certain guards would tell you, what it was. I think they were 18 hours ahead of Cincinnati. But you can go home mentally, which I did, and that's a dumb thing to do because a re-entry is very tough on you. You start all over. Then other than that, we were liberated on August 29th. War was over on August 15th. B-29s came over at low altitude and dropped food to us, 55-gallon drums, food, clothing, medicine. And they were supposed to be on skids with parachutes. I'd say 20% of the parachutes open, the rest of them were flying missiles. And for the first time, I got an air raid shelter in camp, which was exclusively Japanese officers. So I was down there.
The food bombs were coming in, huh?
Yeah, they went through the roof, and there were people hurt.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Anyhow, some of those 29s back, those were my buddies up there. I didn't know about Tinian, and I didn't know about Guam and all that stuff. Those were the 73rd guys.
Right.
God, it was really a wonderful experience. And then we were taken out. Marines came in on landing craft and took us out on August 29th. And the Japanese officer, all the bad people left, and they burned our records, and the whole thing was going up in smoke, you know. But they were no fools, and I'd have gotten out too if I'd been them. And so this new guy there, you know, probably right out of training school, he telling these Marines, you can't take them out. I think Commander Stassen used to be up in Minnesota. He was there, you know. Man, he said, and those guys just set up their guns on tripods. Said, clear the way, you know. Man, I love Marines ever since, you know. And Pappy Boynton was one of my friends. He was a Marine too, and he was a great guy. He was with us. I thought as long as he was there, we'd all be safe.
Yeah, I was getting ready to ask you about that because that you had a good friend that you met there in that camp, Pappy Boynton.
Yeah, we couldn't spend much time together because you were always under this guard and the bayonet. And to go to the toilet, I'm going to use that term, we bend you over there. You had to go up to the guard. In the living space in this camp, we had 2 feet wide and not quite 6 feet long. That was our living space. We'll almost around 2 feet wide, and there were 32 of us there. So that's the space that we had. That was our living quarters. And so then, because it was cold and we were cold, why, you pick a buddy that you want to sleep with and to share the body heat and take his blanket, which was about that long and about that wide, and put him on the bottom, put him there, and then you kind of huddle together. And that's the only POW that I talk to on a continuing basis. You really don't want to discuss things with each other because it brings back the things you don't want to remember. But this person I do. We're good for each other. I talk to him every week, maybe oftener. He has a sense of humor.
Excuse me.
Yeah, that was the greatest day of my life. And to be taken out and aboard the hospital ship Benevolence in Tokyo Bay. And I remember saying, they said, climb the ladder. You know, these are Navy people talking. And we couldn't climb anything. We could hardly move. So they dropped nets to us. We sat in the nets. They picked us up, took us all of our clothes. I wanted something for a souvenir, but they were just filled with lice and shirami, and you know they had to get rid of them. So, but to get in the shower, it took me about really 2 months to really get clean because you couldn't rub because your body was all running. But to have a bed to sleep in, and they have a pillow and sheets, my God! And, you know, they said, well, this was maybe, I don't know, 5 o'clock in the afternoon or something. They said, you know, food will be served at 0600, you know, in the mess. Hell, we're starving. Well, we got to eat. So they finally agreed to set us up, and like a bunch of pigs, really. I mean, we went down there, and you'd eat 1 meal, 2 meals, 3 meals, and then you'd go in and throw up, and then you'd come back out. And, it was a terrible display, but it was what we needed, and
Get things going again.
Yeah, and then I went to the PX or ship store or whatever it was and bought a box of Milky Ways, whatever are 24 of them coming there. Went up to my room, there was somebody else in there, and so I'm opening them very slowly during the night so I didn't awaken him. He had a box over there too. I think I ate 18 Milky Ways that night. And occasionally in a store these days, I'll grab a Milky Way and said, put that on the bill. And all the things that, now that I'm in control, I want. I didn't like darkness. I hated darkness. I hated the blindfolds. So at home now, overkill is what it is. I've got 6 night lights in my room. I never again want to be in darkness. I have 8 pillows. I don't use that many, but I have them all in, nice standing against the wall ready to serve. And I generally only use 2 pillows, but I kind of rotate them. And I want those things in showers. I take maybe 15-minute showers. And all of the things that I didn't have then, I want now, and that's childish. My kids say to me, hey, Dad, you better go back on that rice diet. I have no intentions of doing that.
How many children do you have?
Have 3.
3 children.
Yeah, good kids, yeah.
All doing well and...
Yeah, doing well in life means different things to different people. They're all adopted children. They're great children. There was a time when we adopted them that less than 2 years from the top to the bottom. And, a lot of diapers and everything, but they've been a joy to me. I think they love me. I love them. And one's in Florida, and one's a principal of a school in Southern California, and the other one, the daughter, lives fairly close. But in all of life and summing up, I think I've been a very lucky guy. I'm not sure I earned all the good things, and I think that the good things now are more important to me, having been through the adversity and the tough days. Once you go through there, you appreciate all of life, the simple things. And I'm very impatient with people that complaining about something that is so minute. You know, I wonder how could they be worried about something like this? You get by that, and you got to work at those things and get beyond. So I'll plead guilty of being impatient and expecting perfection and all of that stuff. But and I still I treat these days all as bonus days, and I have for a long, long time since I went back to Japan, my first trip in 1984. I treat them as bonus days, and now that I'm 80 years old, I treat them as double bonus days. And I thank God every day in the morning for taking care of me through the night, and you know, at nighttime, and just say thanks for another bonus day, and thanks for taking care of me. And
Hap,
that's it.
I thank you very much.
Okay.
And